Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10 o'clock p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Wednesday night, November the 2nd. I'm glad to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention is Up to Us, and we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And the chat room's there. Pop the link into the chat room, what we're looking at. Still looking at an article from helpguide.org, and that's a not-for-profit organization, and it's a great website. There's lots and lots of good information on there, and about abuse topics and just about everything. I mean, really any kind of life's issues, life's things that come up in people's lives, depression or eating disorders or diseases, such as like cancer and whatnot. Like there's all kinds of stuff on that website. There's a whole section devoted to abuse topics, and I really like the information's very simple. It's just, I don't know, it's clear, it's written clearly, it's just concise. I really like the definitions that they have, and so that's what we're still looking at, all talking about child abuse and neglect. And tonight I want to sort of focus on the topic of child sexual abuse, and that's the next portion of that article that we were looking at from Monday night. And so, yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I've done a lot of shows, and I have a lot of the same people listening to my shows, a lot of my good friends and people that I don't even know who you are. They're tuning into my shows all the time, and I really appreciate it. And, I had no idea, how long I'd be doing these shows. And November, actually this month, is 2 years. So thank you for spending 2 years with me. I really appreciate it. My own family won't even do that. So there you go, but we're all toxic and dysfunctional. So, but yeah, this is, I really appreciate it because it's a lot of work to keep up with all my shows, even for me. So I know for other people it must be really, really difficult as well. So thank you so much for doing that and tuning in and sticking with me here on this show. So I want to talk about child sexual abuse tonight. So it's a very sensitive topic. All of my shows are very sensitive. You have to listen to all of my shows at your own discretion. I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive subject. You have to know what's good for you to listen to, and you have to make the right choice for yourself. If you think the topics might bother you, then you need to turn the show off, right? And young people under the age of 18, you need to have permission to listen to my shows. My shows are not for younger children. Adult material, really mature audience. Anyone under the age of 18 and under, I just ask that you have a parent or caregiver, somebody who's older who can help you make a decision, who's an adult, who can help you make a decision whether or not you should be listening, because age appropriately, right? So we're talking about child sexual abuse, and I do talk a lot about child sexual abuse, actually, because I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, right? And I know what these kids are going through out here, and it's absolutely horrific, right? No child should ever be abused in any way, It doesn't matter what type of abuse it is. No child should ever be abused, ever. So I hope I'm streaming properly. I had a little bit of trouble kind of getting into my chat room here, so hopefully you can hear me, and I'm actually streaming through properly. I'm just going to check the volume and make sure that's all right. I have no idea whether I'm streaming or not. So if you're in the chat room and you happen to hear that you don't hear any noise, please let me know. Or if I don't know, you wouldn't be able to hear me if I wasn't there. So, but anyway, I'll just keep talking just in case it is actually going through. And child sexual abuse, it affected my life in every way. And I know I didn't want to face it. I talked a lot about that this morning, actually, on my show, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and written about it a lot. And I have a book coming out. I have a book release, press release coming out. Actually, I just put it out there tonight, but a book release Monday. I'm actually calling it an official book release Monday, the 7th of November. I just put the book out this weekend, spent most of the day finalizing it, and this last weekend. And the weekend before, I had really been doing a lot of editing and looking at it, and felt like it was good to go. It's a book that is very sensitive. It's all about the child sexual abuse that I suffered as a child. You have to read very carefully at your own discretion. I did put a discretionary warning on the very front page, the first page of the book, explicit material, and that, it is really only for mature adult audiences and adult readers, people who are of the, who are not minors, right? And so, that's it's pretty graphic. I wanted people to know the truth. I want people to know what it's like for these children out here who are being abused and who are being sexually abused. I want people to know what it's like. See, so many survivors, for many reasons, cannot talk about it. They don't want anybody to know the stigma, the shame that surrounds it, the painful memories, the painful just having to deal with it. You know what I mean? A lot of people would rather not, and a lot of survivors, and I completely understand that. And for me, my whole goal is to go completely public, completely transparent. You know, like, we need to talk about this stuff, or it's never going to go away. It'll always be minimized and shoved under the carpet, because when you say child abuse, people just don't think about what child abuse really represents, and that's children being beaten and tortured in every manner, children being psychologically abused, verbally assaulted, verbally abused, emotionally damaged, right? We're not talking about, so what most people like to think of child abuse is like a child got a spanking or something, you know what I mean? We're not talking about that at all. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about abuse, and there's a real difference. And child sexual abuse, people you say the words and it just doesn't mean anything. But when you talk about a child being raped or molested, sexually assaulted, sodomized, just all manner of horrific torture done to a child, children's bodies are not meant for that type of activity. And, it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. And that's why I'm willing to be honest and just open and be out here in the public talking about this stuff, because I want people to know. Because otherwise, how's it ever going to change? It'll never change. Society doesn't start paying attention to it and just stop saying those very polite words. Now, even today, it's changing. We can actually say child sexual abuse without too many people cringing and running the opposite direction. But still, it's a very uncomfortable topic. Nobody wants to think about an adult taking advantage of and exploiting a child sexually. Nobody wants to think of an adult person or even another child sexually using a child for their own gratification. People don't like to think about that, and yet 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 4 boys will be sexually abused under the age of 18. That's the stats, that's the facts, and that's what's out there. And so it's something that we all need to talk about. If you have 4 children, chances are 1 of your 4 children will be sexually abused under the age of 18 in some way. Whether that's sexual exploitation, molestation, any number of things, sexual assault, right, sexual abuse of some type, right? It's horrible. It never should happen. Children are not sex toys, right? And I like to make that very clear, very plain. I was not a sex toy, but I was forced to be. I was turned into one, you know what I mean? And no child should ever have to go through that, right? This particular article from Help Guide, they're talking about child sexual abuse, a hidden type of abuse, and that's from helpguide.org. And if you go to their website, you can look under the abuse topics. And under the abuse topics, they talk about child abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, and neglect. And that's the name of this actual article. It's actually helpguide.org/mental/child_abuse_physical_emotional_sexual_neglect.htm. That's the link. But if you just type into your browser helpguide.org abuse topics, it'll probably come right up in your browser. So child sexual abuse, they said it's an especially complicated form of abuse because of its layers of guilt and shame. It's important to recognize that sexual abuse doesn't always involve body contact. Exposing a child to sexual situations or material is sexually abusive, whether or not touching is involved. And while news stories of sexual predators are scary, what is even more frightening is that sexual abuse usually occurs at the hands of someone the child knows and should be able to trust, most often close relatives. Isn't that the truth? You look around on some of these websites out here, Darkness to Light, and you have different websites that are really focusing on child sexual abuse and the prevention of it. And they talk a lot about the stats, and, there's been many studies done that actually the same type of numbers come out of them, and that is that, 95% of all child sexual abuse happens, it's perpetrated by somebody the child knows. The stranger danger is about 5 to 10%. Yeah, honestly, like stranger danger is 5 to 10%. That a complete total stranger that your child has never met, or a child has never even come across this person, that's stranger danger. That's 5 to 10%. The rest is just somebody the child knows, somebody who knows the child, right? Somebody who has access to the child. Think about it. Where does child sexual abuse happen? It happens where the child is. Wherever the child is, that's where there's a potential for child sexual abuse, okay? Where does the child spend most of their time? At home. If they're not at home, they're at a daycare, they're at a babysitter's, they're at a relative's home, a friend's home, somebody who's looking after the child, that's sexually abusing children. So whether it be the parents, whether it be the grandparents, the aunts and uncles, the brothers, the sisters, the cousins, yeah, believe it or not, this happens, right? My brother sexually abused me. My brother was sibling incest, and my brother, I believe, was sexually abused by my dad, and I think that's why he did that. But anyway, I can't prove it. So, and my brother killed himself at the age of 33. So there you go. But the thing is sibling incest is actually a little bit more common than people realize. And when you actually start looking at the information that is out there and looking around, you'll find that out. I have Kate Swift coming on Sunday morning. She's going to come and talk about her book, Nobody's Ragdoll. And Kate Swift is she's an author and she's an advocate and she's a survivor of child sexual abuse and incest, sibling incest, and abuse. So she's from the UK. She's the founder and creator, really, of this Tangled Web out of the UK, and the founder of the RSOSA, Reaching Survivors of Sexual Abuse members. It's a group, of a support group, and so she's just busy, publishing books, writing, helping people. Like, she's an amazing woman, and she's coming on the show on Sunday. She's my friend, and which is an honor to call her my friend, to have her as a friend. She'll be on the show Sunday, and so I hope that you can tune in for that, because she's going to talk about her story, Nobody's Ragdoll, and Kate Swift is also a survivor of CSA incest from a sibling, and that's the same story as mine, And so there's so many of us out there. I mean, I knew another girl when I was growing up whose brother was raping her, and my brother was raping me. So this was just part of my life. This has always been part of my life, and it's absolutely horrific. It never should have been. This should never happen to any child, ever, And yet, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 4 boys will be sexually abused in some way under the age of 18. Why? Why are people doing this? This is the question I ask myself all the time: is why anybody would do that? Why anybody? I don't care whether it's who it is, the grandparents, the parents, the siblings, the relatives, the neighbor, the daycare people. Why are people sexually interested in sexually using a child? I'll never understand that at all. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. Children are children. They should be allowed to be children. They're not sex toys for adults' pleasure. Even though sick and twisted individuals have been using children for sex for many, many, many thousands of years since time began. Right? If you do your homework and you study it out, which, I mean, I've been studying this stuff my whole life. I had to live it, so, it's part of my world. This is the truth. People have been doing this forever. Does it excuse it and make it okay? No. There's whole sections of society that are lobbying the government in the United States to allow adult-child sexual relations. Yep. It'd be real interesting to see just who these people were, who put their names on that signature to try to pass that bill. This is absolutely ridiculous. No, it makes me sick. And, I would like to, I hope everybody knows that child sexual abuse is a crime. And I hope that everybody knows that child abuse, period, is a crime. It's a crime. It's against the law. And I hope they bust every single one of them. My brother killed himself. There was no help for me. I mean, I grew in a situation, I was talking about it this morning, where there was no help. I grew up like that. Like, I grew up in hell. So, for me to think about getting help it wasn't going to happen. Nobody's going to help me, and I was not going to go for help. Really unfortunate. My mother was, I'm a victim of, generational, cyclical abuse, right? So we were born into this, and this is what we do, this is what we lived. And so many people will not get help, And, it's just too bad, really, because I'd like to see all of these people out here who are abusing children sexually fry. I really would. People would be going to the gas chambers, or would be sentenced to death. You know what I mean? If there was a death penalty on child sexual abuse, we would lose, I don't know how many, a huge portion of our society would be gone. Because that's how many people are sexually abusing and using children, for their own sexual gratification and their own sexual purposes, exploiting children, child sex rings, child sex trafficking. It's worldwide. It's not just the United States, not just in Canada. We're talking, this is a worldwide issue. And I would love personally to see all these people fry that have ever abused a child sexually in any way. Yep, I'd like to see them all fry. That's me. Yeah. and people say, well, you didn't turn in your own brother. No, so true. I was so abused as a child. That's why I write my stories. That's why I write my books, because that was my life. I did not think that I even had a reason to pursue it. I was beaten and abused by all of my family, basically. You know what I mean? Like, it was not in my vocabulary to say, oh, I think I should get some help. Like, I mean, this was my family. This was it. And so for so many children, they will not get any help, right? And you can tell them all you want. Oh, if you're being abused, make sure you phone the child abuse hotline. Are they going to phone? Many times no, because they're not sure what's on the other side of that hotline. It could be worse than what they're getting at home, and that's what I thought. Because I knew kids who went through the system, the foster care system and stuff, who really had worse lives than I did. And mine was pretty bad. So I was like, oh, God, I don't want to go that route. And so, this is the thing. I knew what I was going to get at my home as well. I survived it. I'm maintaining. I didn't care if my mom killed me. I didn't care if my parents killed me anyway. So it's not like, what I really wanted them to do, I wanted to force them to love me. You know what I mean? And so I thought, no, I'm going to stick it out, and I'm going to be a thorn in their side. And I'm going to force them to have to take care of me. I'm going to force them to be responsible for me, which they never did. It was just my own, I guess, wish that my parents would come around and treat me right. You know what I mean? It just never happened, but that was my way. You know what I mean? Because my parents weren't throwing out the other kids, but my mother was always throwing me out of the house, right? And I thought, at least I'm not in prison for, all kinds of horrible things like my brothers, and I'm not really I wasn't a bad kid really. And my mother was always calling me a whore and a slut. Why? Because my brother sexually used me and raped me as a child. So my mother figured it was my fault. She's going to call me a whore and a slut and all these horrible names, slap me around, beat me up, throw me out of the house, right? And I was the only child that she treated like that. So I was like, no way. You're not throwing me away. I'm the baby in the family. You should have been looking after me. And somebody should have been protecting me, and somebody should have been treating me right. And it was you, looking at my mother. And, of course, that would catch me another beating. And, yeah, you can't force people. I mean, people are sick. That's all there is to it. There's a huge section of society that's very, very sick. And I hope everybody realizes this, right? And if you have children, you need to protect them. You need to do everything you can to protect your children from these sick individuals who think it's perfectly fine to rape, sodomize, molest, sexually use your child, exploit, right? Sexually exploit your child, right? You don't want that to happen to your child. You don't. So if you're a parent and you're listening to this, you better realize that 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 4 boys will be sexually abused in some way. I can't say this enough. We can't say this enough. It needs to become there's no sense in living in fear, right? Fear, it doesn't get anybody very, very far. Education will get you a lot farther, right? Learn how to protect your children. Learn how to keep them safe, and not only just you learning to keep them safe. You teach them to learn for themselves how to keep themselves safe. I tell you, I was in some pretty horrific situations when I was young because I was on the streets. I could have gotten in so much trouble. There were so many times I could have been raped out on the streets after being raped and sodomized by my brother and sexually used for 7 months. A few years later, I was out on the streets. I could have been. There was so many times I was nearly raped by adult men, by other young like teenagers. I was in some serious situations, and I had a guardian angel looking over me. I tell you that because I was so many times I was like kidnapped 5 times. Actually, I was kidnapped 5 times, and I was saved every time. And some of these kids out here are not going to be that lucky tonight. And their parents aren't going to care. I was a throwaway child. My parents didn't care if I came home. So if I had disappeared, which, that's the whole, the issue, I could have run away. It wouldn't have made any difference because they didn't want me at home. So they wouldn't have called it in, right? They wouldn't have called it in as a missing child. They would have just been like, oh, well, whatever, we hate her guts anyway, so she's gone, good. Because my mother hated my guts. And when I was a child, a baby, she hated me, and she wanted to kill me. She actually tried to kill me. So did my dad. But anyway, they were bad. They were trying to kill all the kids. It wasn't just me. But, this is a situation that so many kids will have to deal with tonight, And in your children, you might say, "Oh, it's okay if you go to the mall with your friends, no problem." Do you really know what their friends are doing at the mall? Do you really know that if your child is actually, if your teen or your young preteen is actually has the skills and the know-how to keep themselves safe when somebody decides to come up to them and try to talk to them? Do they really know the dangers that are out there? Like, this is really, we cannot talk about this stuff enough because I know them firsthand. You know what I mean? And like, and I was usually like, at the time, actually, I wasn't all that freaked out by it because I was so used to being mistreated that I didn't care if I died. And I was thinking, hey, if these guys kill me and they rape me or whatever they're going to do to me, it doesn't matter because I'm dead anyway. You know what I mean? Like, that was the frame of mind that I was in, right? And so, I was glad that, later on, that I was saved. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, yeah, thankfully, right? But at the time, it was just like, whatever, because that's how I felt about myself. I really didn't care. That's why I was in the situations I was in. And so, you have to be so, so careful. If you have children, I mean, protect them because there are some really sick people out there. You know what I mean? I ran into quite a few of them, and my parents were two of them. And my brother, there's so many sick and twisted people out there that you don't know what they're going to do to your child. So if you have children, you make sure you protect them because you can't do enough to protect your children, Like, you really can't. And it's not like you just force them to live in a little box and say, oh, well, you can't ever come out because it's an unsafe world. So you're stuck in the little box, and I'll throw you some food every once in a while, and that's not the way to live. Education is what it's all about. It's just bringing up your kids street savvy so that they understand that there are really sick people out there in the world, and that people do hurt people, and that you can't trust everybody just because they come up walking up to you and smiling, and they seem like, oh, what cute boys or something, or cute girls, because there's girls that are actually being used to trip and bait other young girls into prostitution and into sexual exploitation and whatnot, and also into being killed and raped, right? So for gang initiations and stuff, so there's girls out here doing this stuff, but it's a lot of it's guys, and they're out there searching, especially for young girls, and even some young guys, right? Young boys are just as much victimized as girls. Many, young boys will be sexually assaulted, sexually abused. They're talking about that it's pretty well almost probably par. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 4 boys. It used to be, they said that it was about 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 7 boys. 1 in 3 to 4 girls, 1 in 7 boys. But now they're saying it's a little closer. Like, the gap is not all that big. It's about 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 4 boys. And this is horrific. I mean, my God. Like, this has got to stop. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? It really does. And how are we going to stop it? Well, I don't know, because we got to stop these sick people from trying to get their jobs off on kids. I just can't figure that one out. I don't get it. But obviously they see something in it. I think that they need to go away and never ever come out again. That's what I think. I think that, child sexual predators and people who are found 100% guilty, obviously through the courts and the law, I'm all pro-law, should never be able to come back out in the public. You know what I mean? Like, why should children have to pay the price just because, well, my son, he's rehabilitated, or my daughter, she said she would never sexually use another child again. Well, how do we know that? What's the guarantee? I don't even know. Like, I mean, what could you do? Cut off their arms? I mean, seriously. But why should a child pay the price? Why would society think that it was okay that my brother raped me and sodomized me when I was 8 years old? Like, and then continued to sexually use me and sexually assault me for many times through the course of 7 months. Why would anybody think that that's okay? No, that's not okay. Like, that'll never be okay. And it's like, how could you prevent something like that? How could you stop that? First of all, you have to stop one-on-one child-adult situations. And that's a serious issue, even if it's a family member, especially if it's a family member. People see that's the issue. People really think of stranger danger all the time, but they rarely think of mom or dad, grandma, grandpa, boyfriend, girlfriend, aunt and uncle, right? Cousin Johnny, cousin Jane. Women sexually abuse children too. I just want everybody to know this. And, this is just a horrific situation because it should not be happening. You know, like it just shouldn't be happening, and yet it is happening all over this stinking planet tonight. There'll be children who will die because they will be raped, and the little infant toddlers will be raped tonight. Why? I will never understand it. And people that do that type of thing and get caught should just be, I'm sorry, executed. That's how I feel. You kill an infant and a toddler because you raped them and forced yourself on them. You should just be put out. I'm sorry. That's all there is to it. Like, why should society have to pay the price for this? Because some sick individual can't control their sexual urges. My brother, like, what gave him the right to use my body sexually? Like what gave him the right to do that? What was in his mind that he thought it was okay for him to come in and rape me and literally sexually use me like he would a woman for 7 months? What gave him the right? And my mother knew about it. This is the sad part, is that my mother knew about it, and she told me it was not her problem, it was my problem. I was going to have to deal with it, and too bad. Too bloody bad. Right? My mother, my main abuser, was bashing my head in and trying to kill me anyway, so it didn't really matter to her. Right? She just didn't care. She didn't care about anything. She didn't care about any of her children, and she didn't care about anybody. She didn't even care about herself, but she mainly cared about herself. She was pissed off because she was being abused too. She was being raped by my father, right? Because she wasn't supposed to have any more children, and her body was a mess. My dad had been abusing her for years, and she was a mess, really, literally, psychologically, emotionally, psychologically, and physically a wreck, And so she just let my brother sexually use me, right? Well, isn't that just great? Well, that's what a lot of people will do, because they don't care about those kids, and I do. Like, this just makes me angry. Like, I don't have kids. You want to know why? Because I was raped and sodomized as a child. I can't have children. See, this is the thing. It makes me so angry that people would do this to children and think that it's okay. And that a society would stand by and say, oh, well, not my problem. Who's going to care about these kids? Who's going to care about these little babies? Who's going to care? Right? Like, somebody has to care. Somebody has to. It can't just be a handful of people. There's people out here who care more for cats and dogs. Hey, I do too. I'm all about animal and animal humane stuff. I have pets. I don't have any children, so there you go. I have pets, right? I love my cat. I love my bunny rabbit. I love pets. I love animals, and I'm a big time proponent, big speaker for animal rights, for humane treatment of animals. But guess what? A child comes before an animal. Absolutely. There's people out there that do not care that children are being raped tonight. They're just concerned because a dog is being mistreated. It's like, okay, infants are being raped and killed and murdered. That, to me, makes a little more sense, that we spend a little bit more time focusing on the things that are a little more important, like a human life, for God's sakes. And then the animals have to come in there too. But the children should come first. And why is there a whole section of society that says, you know what, we don't care? Too bad if a parent decides to just kill their kids or beat their children so severely that they end up in the hospital, or throw their teens out on the street, or just mistreat their children so badly and get away with it, because so many do. There's only a handful that are busted and arrested and found guilty and do time. The rest of them just get to continue abusing their children or somebody else's child. Isn't that great? And then so many of the ones that get arrested and busted do a little bit of time, come back out, pop out more kids, and abuse them and kill them too. We see lots of that too. Right? So just be a voice. I mean, my God, just get involved, like locally, find out, what groups are doing what in your area, and get involved, right? That's what I'm doing. I'm working on, there's really nothing here where I'm at. You just don't see it. It's not, Calgary, Alberta is about 30, 40 years behind the times. And that we like to pretend that we don't have child abuse here, but we do. And so I'm here to change that, you know what I mean? So, yeah, use your voice. Do whatever you can, make some noise, and, get involved where you can, right? Because these kids, they can't wait. They'll die tonight. And then tomorrow night we're going to lose a whole bunch more, the next night, until we fix this system, right? This is what I'm always talking about. So, we just have to make sure that we do what we can, right? And just remember these kids out here tonight. This is absolutely horrific. And do not support this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And a child is being abused, you do the right thing, you make a phone call. You can save a child's life, right? And if you're wrong and there's no abuse, oh well, no big deal. But if you're right, you can save a child's life. Have a great night, everybody. Talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.